In the novel 1984, author George Orwell presents a dystopian world in which technological advancements keep party leaders and the masses under careful observation and constant control. The novel's protagonist, Winston Smith, is a citizen of the superstate Oceania, an oligarchy of hierarchical rule under the principles of English Socialism known as Ingsoc. Altogether, three totalitarian states, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, exist and are constantly at war with each other. In Oceania, the party consists of inner party members who are the ruling elite and regular party members who are citizens. The party's leader, Big Brother, displays massive images of his kind throughout London. The images, complete with dark hair and a substantial mustache, often include the words, "Big Brother is watching you." Winston works in the records department of the Ministry of Truth, which handles all party literature and propaganda, altering or destroying documents from the party once published. He often throws evidence into a memory hole where it is sucked into the building's internal furnaces to ensure that the party's version of the past is never questioned. The other three ministries are the Ministry of Love, which handles all party prisoners, the Ministry of Peace, which handles war, and the Ministry of Plenty, which manages the production of party goods. These state-endorsed products include Victory cigarettes, Victory gin, and Victory coffee, all of which are of extremely poor quality. Winston has never quite accepted the party and its ideological principles of Ingsoc. He believes in an unalterable past and finds party politics reprehensible. Winston wishes for privacy, intimacy, freedom, and love, but cannot openly express these thought crimes for fear of imprisonment or death. When the book opens, Winston is writing in a diary inside his meager apartment where a telescreen transmits party information and propaganda. This state-run spying device also allows the propaganda team, known as the Thought Police, to listen to and watch party members in Oceania. He writes his true memories that are related to his life and the violence of the party. Penning these thoughts is punishable by death if he is caught. At the Ministry of Truth, Winston sits through the daily 2 Minutes Hate, which rails against Oceania's enemy, Eurasia. The propaganda is so powerful that the people around him begin shouting at the screen. Of course, Winston must join in to avoid suspicion. Finding himself increasingly curious about the past, Winston returns in secret to a junk shop where he bought his diary. The proprietor, a kind old man named Mr. Charrington, shows him a room above the shop, and Winston imagines what it might be like to live there among old things, free from the constant presence of the telescreen. One day, at the Ministry of Truth, a dark-haired girl named Julia trips and falls to the ground in front of Winston. As he helps her to her feet, she slips him a note declaring her love for him. Winston is astounded, but extremely excited by the possibility of a love affair. The affair must be secret, as the party forbids any sort of sexual pleasure and marriage without approval beforehand in adherence to the tenets of Ingsoc. With a great deal of effort to remain undetected, Julia and Winston finally meet in a secluded clearing in a wooded area. Winston learns Julia's name for the first time. The two discover a mutual hatred of the party and eventually fall in love. Winston believes that it is possible to overthrow the party, while Julia is satisfied simply living a double life. Eventually, Winston rents the room above Mr. Charrington's flat, where Winston and Julia continue to meet in secret since they are limited to public interactions and minimal conversations. A lead party member who often attends the 2 Minutes Hate suddenly takes on an important role in Winston's life. He introduces himself to Winston as O'Brien, then discreetly gives him his home address on a slip of paper. Winston suspects that the party leader has approached him because he is part of the underground movement, thinking that his true path towards rebellion has finally begun. After some time, Winston and Julia visit O'Brien, who, as an inner party member, lives lavishly and has the freedom to turn off his telescreen. Winston agrees to renounce the party and discusses his true beliefs. O'Brien welcomes Winston and Julia into the Brotherhood and tells them that they must be willing to do anything to work towards its cause. They agree, but say that they will not do anything that would prevent them from seeing each other again. During Hate Week, the party's enemy becomes Eastasia rather than Eurasia, and Winston must work long hours to correct all party publications referring to war with Eurasia. The party is now at war with Eastasia and has always been at war with Eastasia. During Hate Week, a mysterious man brings Winston a briefcase, then leaves abruptly. Inside is a book that Winston reads aloud to Julia later at Mr. Charrington's apartment. He reads about the revealing history of Oceania, capitalism versus totalitarianism, and the main goals of the party until they both fall asleep. Winston wakes up hours later, repeating his oft-stated phrase, "We are the dead." Suddenly a voice coming from the wall echoes him, "You are the dead." There's a telescreen hidden behind a picture on the wall. When uniformed men storm the room with Mr. Charrington, it becomes clear that he is a member of the Thought Police. He has been disguised as a kind old man, but is far younger than Winston imagined. Winston and Julia are arrested, separated, and brought to the Ministry of Love. While in a holding cell, Winston realizes that O'Brien was never part of the underground movement, but actually works in the Ministry of Love. Winston is violently tortured at first, and he is forced to admit to a litany of crimes he did not commit, including murder and espionage. O'Brien begins to break Winston's spirit, telling him that his memory is flawed and that he is insane. The party, O'Brien explains with a lunatic intensity, seeks absolute power for power's own sake. This is why it will always be successful, is always right, and will ultimately control the entire world. Winston cannot argue, as he faces obstinate and illogical fallacies, all the while being subjected to torture. Little by little, O'Brien shows Winston, with the use of electric shock machines, beatings, and starvation, the way of the party. He forces Winston to accept that if the party says so, 2 + 2 = 5. Broken to the core, Winston finally submits to his re-education. He is no longer beaten, is fed at regular intervals, and is allowed to sleep, though the lights never go out. Although he seems to accept the party's reality, Winston still clings to the last remaining kernel of himself and his humanity, his love for Julia. O'Brien attempts to force Winston to betray Julia. He takes Winston to room 101, containing the worst thing in the world, which is different for everyone. Winston is bound to a chair where O'Brien attaches a mask cage to his face. The contraption contains huge, hungry, and carnivorous rats. Winston feels a desperate, deep, panicked fear. He cannot take it, and finally screams for O'Brien to put someone else in his place. Anyone, even Julia. O'Brien has succeeded in brainwashing his subordinate. Winston, a damaged, changed, empty shell of a man, is released into the world. In his new life, he sees Julia once, by chance, but they are no longer in love. Each betrayed the other, and prison changed them powerfully. There is no hope for their relationship. In the final pages of the novel, Winston obtains a somewhat trivial, meaningless job that pays surprisingly well. He spends his time at a cafe drinking Victory gin and playing chess in his regular seat. Upon hearing that Oceania has successfully repelled Eurasians' war advances, he stares reverently into the eyes of a man with dark hair and a big mustache. Winston cries. He has finally completed the rehabilitation he started in the ministry of love. He loves Big Brother.